Hey guys, thanks for joining me as we continue talking about the Joy Revolution. I am so excited to share something with you today that I discovered a few months ago, and I hope it has as same positive impact on your life as it did in mine. It comes from Psalm chapter 13, and I just want to read a couple verses to you. This is David writing, and listen to what he says. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? I mean, this guy is sounds like he's at the end of his rope. He thinks God's forgotten about him. His enemies are just running over him. Let's keep going. Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I've prevailed against him. Let those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. A few months ago, as I was studying this psalm, obviously the first half of this psalm, David's losing. I mean, he thinks God's forgotten about him. He thinks his enemies are just running over him. He's looking at his life. He's really saying, why should I keep on going? Why should I continue to live? What's the purpose? His enemy, his adversity has all the momentum. Matter of fact, he says, my enemies are rejoicing over me. Then he says, but I will rejoice in the Lord. And I began to study that word rejoice there. And it's an interesting word. It has a couple of different meanings. Obviously, the main meaning is to joy again, rejoice, joy again. It has the sense of celebrating and enthusiasm. But it also has a secondary meaning that means to turn. It means to revolve. Isn't it interesting that the Old Testament word for rejoice also means a revolution? It means a turning. And that's exactly what we see happen here. Because the first part of this psalm, David's losing. But when he begins to rejoice, his rejoicing begins to be what turns the situation. His rejoicing is what begins to turn his heart and to turn his mind, begins to turn his emotions. So really, rejoicing is the revolution that we all need. You know, when I read this psalm, I think about a football game, and I know we're in the middle of college football season. And have you ever been to a game and maybe your team's losing? There's been a couple games recently where some teams were up big at halftime just to have the other team come back and win and come back from behind and win the game. And have you ever been sitting there in the stands and your team's losing? The other team, maybe they're up by 2 or 3 scores. Maybe it's halftime, and you're just thinking, man, we're lost. And you look across the field, and the other team, they're jumping up and down on the bench, and they're swinging towels, and they're dancing in the end zone, and they're high-fiving each other. And then you look at your team, and all your guys are sitting on the bench. They've got their towels over their heads. Their shoulders are hanging down. It's just the picture of defeat. One of my favorite coaches, I heard him say many times, there's nothing more meaningless in a football game than the score at halftime. And so your team goes into halftime down by 3 or 4 scores. They come out, and you begin to watch one guy on the sideline. Everybody's down. The other team across the field, they're rejoicing. They have all the momentum. And you see one guy on your team, and he starts walking up and down the sideline. He starts popping people on the backside, grabbing guys by the face mask, and he begins slapping guys on the back, and you hear him. Man, he's pumping everybody up. And then one guy turns to 2 guys, turns to 3 guys, and the next thing you know, your quarterback's on the field, and he's smacking those big old offensive linemen on the butt, saying, let's go, we can do this. And the next thing you know, they take the ball and they go down and score. And there's a little bit of celebration. The other side, they're still celebrating because they're still up on the scoreboard by a couple scores. Then your team gets the ball back. They get a stop, and they go right down and score again. And momentum begins to cross the field. And when that happens, it's an amazing thing. And so then your team starts getting some life, and your guys are jumping up and down on the sideline, and they begin to change their sound. Instead of living at a place of defeat, because one guy decided to rejoice. Because one guy decided to change the sound. Because one guy realized if I change the sound, we can turn this whole game around. There can be a revolution in this game. And because one guy chose to not live based on what was happening on the field and what was happening on the scoreboard, but he realized it may be halftime, but the game's not over. There's still something worth fighting for. There's still something worth trying to win here. And he began to change the sound. The next thing you know, the whole team changes the sound, and your team goes on and wins the game. Guys, that is a perfect picture of life for us, because for some of us, our adversary, the adversity, the challenge we're facing, it's kicking our tail and taking our names. The challenges in life have all the momentum, just like with David in Psalm 13. But if you and I will change our sound and rejoice, if we will make the choice to rejoice and to joy again and change the sound of our lives like David did, everything can begin to turn around. There can be a revolution. The situation can revolve, and momentum can be on our side. And you and I can begin to win even if we felt like we were losing. Listen, guys, the game's not over. It doesn't matter what the scoreboard of your life says. It doesn't even really matter what's been going on the field. I believe this: if you will joy again, if you will rejoice and change the sound coming out of your life. And listen, that's important, because my voice is the most influential voice in my life, because I hear my voice more than anybody else's voice. And if you and I can hear ourselves begin to rejoice, there can be a turning in our hearts, a turning in our minds, and a turning in the situation. A real revolution can happen. Momentum can come back to our side, and we can win. My prayer for you this week is this: is if, man, you feel like you're losing, that you won't be down in the mouth, you won't get negative, you won't start blaming God and blaming everybody else, but you'll change your sound. You'll begin to rejoice, and as you rejoice, the power of rejoicing will begin to turn things around on your behalf. You can win, and I believe, we're going to believe together, that we all win as we begin to rejoice in God's goodness. Bye-bye.